this incredibly profound, yet profoundly simple question has crossed the minds of pretty much every astute thinker throughout history. It not only continues to rack the minds of the likes of Aristotle and Gandhi, but it also stirs the minds of Sarah during her high school years and even Philip during recess. From the wisest of the wise to the most gullible of the naive, we all ponder the question, does God exist? Evidently, this question has survived the test of time. Surprisingly, though, although this question has been asked since man could question anything, it continues to be asked as if it has never been pondered, as if it is a completely new question, as if nothing has ever been said on the matter. Instead of addressing this question as if it is a new concept, let's address this question for what it is. Let's also expose just why it is asserted as if it is something that must be explained from the ground up every time it is mentioned. So, does God exist? Well, to ask if something exists, one is not only asking if something has an impact on at least a minuscule part of reality, but that person also implies they have specified that which they are asking about. When someone asks this question, they are asking if God is a real thing which affects reality at least in some small way, while implying they have specified what exactly they mean by God. The latter detail seems to be the implication which is responsible for why the answer to this question seems to elude us all. When someone asks this question, their unspoken specification of God is quite different than someone else's. This seems to be the universal problem which leads to this dilemma. When most people ask someone about God's existence, they are not asking if God exists as God, but they are asking what else is true about God besides the central truth, that He is responsible for reality. No one would ask, does the thing responsible for reality exist? Which is what does God exist literally means if there are no secondary questions implied beneath this question. This question seems to disguise what is really in question. When asking about God's existence, many are really asking for evidence supporting additional details of God. To simply ask, does God exist, deserves a simple yes. If someone wants evidence for other details, such as whether or not God is theistic, deistic, omniscient, omnipotent, or some other thing, that person should ask about those things directly, instead of asking indirect questions that suggest the existence of the thing responsible for reality is in question. There is no question concerning the existence of the primary cause responsible for reality. If this cause did not exist, there could be no secondary causes or effects. Given the fact that it is nonsensical to question the existence of that which ultimately enables us to question its existence, one should replace does God exist with a question a bit more precise for what is really in question. What lies beneath this question is a series of questions that don't really challenge God's existence. What else is true, or what else can be discovered about this thing besides it being the first cause? Are just a couple examples of countless others that so many people try to wrap up in one vague question in disguise. A lack of additional characteristics, or at least ignorance of those details, does not disqualify this primary first cause from having the title God. Now don't misunderstand me. Many additional details are essential if Christianity is to be deemed true. But those details are not necessary, they don't need to be true, they don't even need to be credited to the primary cause for it to remain qualified for or to maintain its office. For the most part, atheists accept the reality that deductive reasoning leads one to conclude that there was a primary first cause in the sequences of causes and effects witnessed today. Skeptical naturalists have given this cause a different title, the singularity, which is in essence God. Christians believe in the same God atheists do, although atheists would shun that term because for them it for some reason carries other meanings besides the only detail necessary for anything to be God. Perhaps it's easier to lack belief in God if God must have other characteristics to maintain that office, which increases the chance for non-existence. Christians attribute many other discoverable details to the primary first cause, which are essential for Christendom. These characteristics, Christians believe, are things all people are without excuse to suppress, although a lack of these attributes would not strip this primary first cause of its office. I argue that not only Christians should believe all people are without excuse for suppressing these truths, but any sensible and rational person should believe this as well. The following verses are not being presented as evidence. although they very well could be presented as such if I chose to make my case via presuppositional apologetics. But the verses are presented as something to reflect that which I've already given a case for, and will continue to build as this project develops. Romans 1 verses 1 through 19 rings no more true than now. For what can be known about God is plain to them, because God has shown it to them. For his invisible attributes, namely his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly perceived ever since the creation of the world and the things that have been made, so they are without excuse. These verses address the claim that humanity is without excuse in suppressing two specific things about reality itself. The primary cause responsible for reality has attributes which are described as invisible, meaning they are facts about this thing which cannot be seen. The two attributes are eternal power and divine nature, respectively. Not even the supposed atheist often suppresses the primary cause's eternal power, which is merely the fact that it is responsible for nudging reality into motion. The atheist attributes this nudging to the singularity, which I established earlier as, in essence, the same thing as God, because it is identical in description with all that is necessary for something to be labeled God. Thanks to the law of cause and effect, combined with deductive reasoning, everyone is without excuse in suppressing this truth, which displays the first cause's power as primary cause. Reason disallows the rational mind from stopping short and merely acknowledging the power of this primary cause, which cannot be an effect of a cause before itself. This vague primary first cause, by being just that, has set in motion all that is needed to be discovered. Not only that a first cause is needed, which is simply its eternal power, but also other details about itself which can be labeled as its divine nature. If humans were to stop short with God's eternal power, then there would be only one religion, because we would all believe the same thing about God, even if we called God by different names. But God's divine nature is what enables us to distinguish theism from deism, and all other denominations of different religions from each other. Certain details concerning his divine nature are what many are in disagreement over. When someone asks if God exists, they are not questioning this thing's eternal power, but its divine nature. More often than not, one is asking, what is true about God? Or, can you prove to me that your version or specification of God is true? Atheists tend to define atheism as a lack of belief in God. This definition seems to be slightly misleading. The first letter in atheism means no, or lack of, but theism doesn't mean God, as in what God is in essence, concerning solely his eternal power. Theism is essentially God's eternal power plus divine nature, which are additional details which personify God. Theism is a specific understanding of this same God we all acknowledge as first mover plus a divine nature. So, atheism is better defined as no theistic God, opposed to no God at all. Atheism concerning its root word does not reject the existence of God as first mover, but rejects details attributed to God. To ask, does God exist, is misleading if that person is not questioning the existence of the first mover, which would, ironically, regress to an infinite regress. Atheist, more precisely, rejects theism as well as any other understanding of God that has some sort of divine nature. After careful consideration of the often unspoken implications of many words we often use when addressing the question spotlighted in this project, this question becomes much more transparent. When asking, does God exist, a literal interpretation of that question is not what is in question. Rather, the question is better understood as something similar to the following. Does God possess these additional characteristics which reveal him as a loving father of creation, as Christians so passionately claim? Is this true about God? Or is something else true? Does your understanding of God's supposed divine nature accurately portray God as something much more sophisticated than a vague primary first mover? To be succinct, the question is not does God exist, but who is God? The word who questions this first mover's additional characteristics. It questions what would personify God if these additional characteristics can be determined, and actually deem God a who. This incredibly profound, yet profoundly simple question has and will continue to bounce around our rational minds for ages to come. As we continue to ponder this question, we can only hope that progress will be made concerning this concept which seems to be a passion of us all. Profoundly simple questions deserve a rather simple answer. To simply ask, "Does God exist?" deserves a simple yes. If someone is questioning other attributes beyond God's eternal power, they should be a bit more transparent and realize we haven't been questioning God's existence all along. Perhaps then we can actually discuss our passions without having someone shipwreck a healthy, intelligent exchange by arbitrarily asking a question which was never really in question to begin with.